All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Fates Wide Wheel, a Quantum Leap podcast. Dennis here. This week, we're excited to interview artist JJ Lindell. You can find him at JJ Lindell on Twitter and Instagram and jjlindell.com on the web. JJ is a designer, illustrator, educator, and storyteller, originally from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Over the last decade since he started his studio, he has specialized in commercial artwork of all types, including product design, editorial, advertising, web design, publishing, and branding. Alongside his graphic design work, JJ creates and facilitates arts education programming for youth and adults focused on introducing STEAM subjects through hands-on workshops. And if you follow all things Quantum Leap on Twitter and Instagram, you have no doubt seen his original artwork inspired by the Revival series. And one of his prints now adorns my wall behind me if you're watching the video version of this episode. Now, this episode is a first for Fates Wide Wheel. I was not able to be part of this interview due to scheduling conflicts. This one is all Sam. I regret not getting the chance to talk with JJ directly, but this is also kind of cool because that means I get to listen to this one simply as a fan of Quantum Leap, and not to mention Sam and JJ. But before we get to the interview, we want to thank our patrons, as always. Al's Place, Leap Fan Site, Bourbon and Board Games, Carolyn, Cosplay Dad, Joanne Bartlett, Dana Bias, Rich Bork, Kevin Butcher, Carol Davis, Dex Lower, Dermot Devlin, Barry Donovan, Brian Dreadful, Troy Evers, Larry Ganny, Jason Geis, Michelle Hoffman, Amy Holtkamp, Lori Johnson, Bess A. Corey, Lady Eternal, Rob Nunn, Oddly Specific with Audra, Christopher Redmond, Adrian Saul, Karen Saxon, Mike Stouffer, Heather Strabiak, Damon Sugamelli, Larry Trujillo, Stuart Williams, Joe Wilson, our anonymous donors, and we want to welcome our newest patron, Jerry Seward. Thanks so much, Jerry, not just for your patronage, but also for the kind words that you shared with us online. And as always, a special shout out to Jessica Conger and Betsy Freimeyer, our spouses who provide childcare while we record our show. If you would like to become a patron of the pod, you can make monthly contributions at patreon.com/fateswidewheel, or you can send a one-time contribution at buymeacoffee.com/fateswidewheel, and that information is in the show notes. With that being said, here's our interview with JJ Lindell.
All right, fellow travelers, welcome JJ Lindell to the show. JJ, how are you?
I'm doing very well, Sam. How are you today?
Doing great. It's a Saturday, it's early afternoon, so it's that point in the day when I still have plenty of energy, and it's the weekend, so I'm not solo parenting for the bulk of the day. So yeah, it's good stuff. It's good stuff.
All right,
How about yourself?
I will try not to sap all of your energy out during our talk.
We've been talking for a bit off mic. I don't think that's going to be the case. I have a feeling this will be invigorating. I always love the opportunity we get to talk to, creative folks in general. But with your work specifically, I think this is going to be a lot of fun. It'll be something a little bit different for me and for our listeners. So I'm really looking forward to it. I wanted to start off just with a quick anecdote, which is, a bad interviewer of me. I want you to do the bulk of the talking, but I mentioned this briefly off mic. I can recall very vividly, honestly, walking into Graham Crackers Comics in the Loop, which was kind of right around the corner from my offices when I worked downtown in Chicago. And I walk in, and being a big Star Trek guy, I see this comic that had been out for a little while. I wasn't like stumbling onto it when it was brand new. And Star Trek 5-Year Mission, and these covers, and just seeing these covers and being like, wow, I really love these covers. And ended up picking up a couple of issues, but didn't. This is honestly, I think, shortly before the pandemic started, so I didn't really pick too much up after that, but, read a few digitally. And, but I love these covers that I was seeing. Flash forward a few years, and we start seeing these amazing Quantum Leap posters that you're designing and doing this wonderful art for, and didn't put two and two together until I visited your website, and then all of a sudden I'm like, it's the same guy. So without knowing, I have been a fan of your work for a while, and this is a thrill because so much of the art that you've done that's on your website is really just right in my wheelhouse, from the Star Trek to the Star Wars to, the X-Files stuff, obviously the Quantum Leap stuff, and huge fan too of the West Wing stuff that you've done. So I'm really looking forward to this, and I really appreciate you being here.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here, and thank you for all the kind words. And it's funny because I tend to work in a lot of genre franchises. And so I will talk to people who will make those connections between my work. Sometimes they're a Trekkie and then they see my X-Files stuff or vice versa. And it's fun people making those connections. And for me, as an artist, it's so fun being able to play in these huge sandboxes that I, as a fan, have loved, since I was a kid. I mean, I've been a Star Trek fan from since I was in grade school, X-Files as well. And then now having a chance to play in the Quantum Leap sandbox is like a dream come true, because that's been one of my favorite shows since it originally aired when I was just in grade school.
Oh, that's so cool. I mean, that's certainly something that we have in common. So I have a ton of questions, but since you mentioned it, what are your earliest memories of Quantum Leap?
I remember watching Quantum Leap when it originally aired. This would have been toward the end of the run. And so I have really specific memories of watching season 5 episodes. So this would have been 92, 93. Leaping of the Shrew, I remember watching that one specifically. I remember sitting down to watch season 5, and I remember the first thing I was like, what's with the theme song? What did they... I'm like, my heart's racing. And so it's so funny to think about that. And I'm sure you have similar memories of sitting down and watching TV shows. And then you're like, okay, so that was this year. It's like, I was in 2nd grade watching this TV show that has been a part of my life ever since. So I remember loving Quantum Leap from a young age. I was always a, nerd sci-fi fan. And it was a unique show in that it blended the science fiction elements with really specific period drama. And so as a lover of history as well, it was this cool kind of blend of two things that I was starting to get interested in as a young kid.
Yeah.
I managed to catch the end of it airing before the show went off the air, and then just watching it in reruns for years after. And, doing the typical nerd thing where it's like, you buy your blank VHS tapes and you find out where it's airing in syndication and you're hitting record. And if you're a real go-getter, you're like, okay, I'm going to stop recording when the commercial break starts, and I'm going to start recording again before it comes up. I'm going to try to live edit these commercials out. Yep. So I have lots of memories of doing that with Quantum Leap and some other shows. And I would say other early memories I have of Quantum Leap were some of the tie-in media,
yes.
which kind of connects with what I'm doing for the new version of the show now. I managed to jump on the Innovation Comics towards the end of their run, around 92 and 93. I think the first one that I picked up was the final issue, which was, we'll see how knowledgeable some of the listeners are here. It was issue 13, which featured Sam leaping into an extraterrestrial on their UFO. And so I worked my way back from there. And then the novels, which came out not long after that. I picked those up as I could, went to my local library and got some of the novels out as well. And so just trying to, keep catching up with these characters since they weren't on television anymore, just to try and, have some more adventures with Sam and Al.
Yeah. I love that. And I love to, because the comic books I can remember also, there was this comic book store outside of St. Louis when we lived there called Bugsy's Comics. And I used to go to Bugsy's Comics, and that's where I picked up all my books. Yeah. And I was like 10 years old, at the time, but, I'd go in every week and, pick up whatever. And I remember when the Quantum Leap stuff, seeing it on the rack for the first time, and I was just sort of like, oh, I've got to get this. But the funny thing is I only bought a couple of issues just because it was, small print run. It wasn't necessarily something I think that they were ordering a lot of. And, sometimes I'd get there and they'd already be out, or I would just frankly kind of forget about it. So it's been one of those things that I came to, later. And, such interesting stories. I felt like they pushed the boundaries. Sometimes I'm not sure if they pushed them, in the direction that I wanted them to go.
Yeah.
But with the novels, that was another thing that was amazing is those covers. I felt like they were so evocative, and sometimes they just really nailed, our principles and that feel of the story, which I think is something that your work has done so well, because first of all, the thing that I love is that they're different. I think it would be very, very easy for an artist to go in and just kind of do stuff in a similar vein, so that they feel like, kind of like this set. And yet in a way, I feel like the unique quality that you bring to each one to help tell that story of the episode, is in itself kind of, a style, which is great. You'd been working for a while on other genre stuff. What prompted you to go and do the Quantum Leap stuff with the new series?
Well, first of all, thank you. I sometimes I feel what you're talking about can be a blessing and a curse, because you have some artists who have a very particular style with their work. And I have never really been attracted to that. I always like to try new things and work with slightly different media and different styles. And so I think that it keeps my work fresh, but it leads to situations like you were talking about where it's like, oh, this is the same guy. I didn't make the connection, because sometimes my work can be in very different styles. In terms of why Quantum Leap, one, because I was so excited that the show was coming back in some form after so many years and so many sort of teases that it might get rebooted or renewed in some way. I was just very excited. And then when it aired and it was good, then I try to, with my schedule, I work on a lot of client work. I do a lot of officially licensed stuff. I always try to keep some time in my schedule to work on personal projects like these for things that I'm passionate about, because I find that if I don't do that, my other work suffers. It's just like, wanting to warm up before you start doing something. It sort of feels like a warm up to me, where I can do something that's on my own terms, where I can use that as sort of a muse in a way. And then that energy I can bring to other projects too. So that's sort of where it started. And what I have been, really pleased about is the reaction from fans and from the folks who are involved in making the show, the cast and the crew. So that has been really great, just to see people embrace, what I'm doing and just sort of get where I'm coming from and my love for the franchise. And it's just nice to be able to share that, because, Quantum Leap was a really popular show in its time. But I feel like it's not a franchise that has been in the front of people's minds for a very long time. And so it can be harder to connect with fans of that property unless you know some in real life. And
yeah.
And I know you've been doing this show for a while now, which I mean, I can't imagine how excited you guys were when it was announced that this new show had been picked up. I mean, I want to hear about that.
Yeah, I mean, it was a huge thrill, and it was one of those things that, which is funny that you bring that up, because it was almost exactly a year ago. I think it was January 17th of 2022, so it was almost exactly a year ago when that announcement came. And Dennis and I had talked on the show about our feelings towards a possible reboot, because there'd been murmurings here and there, and I had kind of come out, yeah, and I kind of come out on the side of like, I'm okay if it never happens. But as soon as the announcement came, I was just sort of like, okay, let's go, and I mean, it's been such a thrill. I feel like 2022 has genuinely, it's just changed the way that we do everything. And it's changed the level of activity and the level of engagement and involvement around it. And I think that, quite honestly, your art and the way that you've shared it through social media has been a part of that, seeing that and being able to kind of like, do the retweets and get tagged, by you or tag you and stuff. And, that kind of engagement never I just don't think it would have happened, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. When we started doing this podcast, we were sometimes having 40 downloads on an episode. And we were like, yay, there's 40 people listening, and now it's a lot more than that. And, which is great. We love that there are people that, want to listen to us talk about the show. But it's definitely changed the trajectory of everything that we're doing. And I think, like you said, prior to the revival, you would not have been able to get that same level of connection with people unless you were perhaps face to face, or you were going to a specific message board or a specific site. One of the things that's really cool, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this, is seeing the showrunners, the producers, the cast retweet, or share your stuff on Instagram. What has that been like?
It's, everybody has been so gracious about the work. And so, it's been amazing. And, some of the folks have sent private messages and people are getting prints, which is wonderful. Again, as a second grader who used to watch this show, at home, sitting on the couch, and now it being back and just being able to collaborate a little bit with the creatives who are behind it, it's thrilling. It's wonderful. And, certainly it also puts, the onus on me to make sure that I'm bringing my A game when I'm doing these designs. But that's not a bad thing either. It's just, I've been very fortunate throughout my career so far to have fans of the various franchises that I've worked in embrace my work, whether it's Quantum Leap or the X-Files or Star Trek or Star Wars. The internet can be a very prickly, scary place.
Sure.
But in my experience, there is such grace as well there in places. And, I have been shown, such warm and accepting feelings when I put this art out there. And very much so from the folks behind Quantum Leap. And so I'm very grateful and, just going to take that and try to keep moving here. And, I'm doing the prints weekly now as the show's airing. And, I'm getting as much info as I can before the shows air. When I did the first 8 prints, I did them post airing. And so I was able to watch the episodes, come up with my concepts. And so now the challenge is I'm not seeing final episodes while I'm starting my design work. And so I'm jumping in, using synopses, using some of the promotional images, little tidbits from, the creative staff, the writers and producers. And I've done that kind of work before, but it is challenging because you want to try to read between the lines and come up with a design that's basically evocative of a story that you yourself have not seen play out. And I generally try not to, spoil things in the work that I do anyway. So that helps. That helps to stick to that motto as well. But you want to make sure that you're connecting with the heart of the story. And so far, I think I've been doing a good job of that. And so we'll just keep going. And I've already got a design mostly ready to go for the upcoming episode. I'm waiting on a couple more pieces of reference for that, but I'm excited to share that one as well. It's just been thrilling. It's been a thrilling ride, and we're over halfway through season 1 now, and we know that there's a season 2 on the horizon. So that's even
right. Yeah, I completely agree. To think, a year ago, a little over a year ago, we didn't even know that this was going to be happening. And now here we are knowing that we're definitely getting a season 2. It's incredibly exciting as fans of the show. You mentioned kind of getting to the heart of it, and this goes for all your work, not just Quantum Leap, but as an artist, these days I feel more like part-time artist, but as an artist myself, I think that one of the things that's so incredibly important is the emotion of a story and the way that, you as an artist connect with it. And then the way as an observer, kind of consumes it. When you're doing that, especially not necessarily having seen the whole episode yet, how do you find ways to connect with the heart of the story? And are there particular things that you find yourself gravitating towards more often than others? Or do you kind of have to look at the whole in order to find that little piece, that little thread that helps you to create these prints?
It varies. It really does. I think that tone is very important. So if you can find the right tone of the episode or the film or the comic book, whatever you're adapting, if you can find a way to take that tone and to boil it down into an image, I think that's the key. And there's lots of, tools in your toolbox that you can use to do that. And for me, a big one is layout. And when I'm working on something, I always have to remind myself that less is more. Because I think that there is an instinct as a creative that you just need to keep pouring and pouring and pouring more into a project.
Yeah.
And I have found over the years that there are diminishing returns on that, especially when it comes to visual art. Because, there are artists that will create incredible pieces that they will work and slave for hours and hours and days and weeks, creating incredibly detailed pieces. And that's wonderful. That's phenomenal. And I think that that's something that needs to exist. But at the same time, I think that as an artist, it's good to know how much you need to put into a piece before you sort of hit that tone that you're looking for. And so I think if there's something that I've cultivated over the years of doing it, it's that. So taking a design, trying to boil it down to its simplest form, and letting all the other extraneous stuff fall away.
Yes.
So if you can hit the tone, if you can find the simplest way to lay it out, the rest of it is really execution. And working in a retro style, working in a vintage style, it's so fun to execute because, especially for a show like Quantum Leap, which features episodes taking place in different time periods, I can pull from those time periods. I can pull pieces of artwork. I can pull homages to movie posters from that era or that are focused on the story that is being told, and I can work all of those into a brand new design. I had a lot of fun doing the poster art for episode 4, which was A Decent Proposal, because I got to do this really wacky 80s Memphis School of Design inspired poster. And that was really inspired simply by, the setting of the episode and Ben's outfit as the lead.
Yes.
These bold colors. There were some set dressings and some design choices by the production staff that sort of kept popping up in my head. You have all these neon lights in the club during the teaser. And so you just sort of pick things up throughout the episode that stick with you. And you have to trust, well, if this stuck with me, hopefully it stuck with somebody else. And so if I can find a way to grab onto those and boil them down and put them into a visual medium, people will look at it and go, hey, I get that. I get what you're doing. And that's so exciting as an artist to sort of take something, synthesize it, put it out there and have people go, yes, I'm with you, without any words. If that answers your question, I know that's a
no, it's a lovely answer. I love that because I used to have an acting teacher, and one of the things that he would do is that you'd get going, right, and following your instincts as an artist is so incredibly important. But as you were saying, you sometimes you have that urge to just like keep going and going and going and going, and things get bigger and bigger and bigger, and oftentimes you'd get through working on a moment, and he would just kind of come up, and he and I'll never forget this because it wouldn't be from out in the house. He'd come on stage with you and, in a very kind of like almost hushed tones, he'd be like, that was great. Now distill that. And, it's like, I see what you're doing there, distill that down. And it was such a great piece of direction because, you really did understand. It's like, okay, I got there. Now I can, really kind of just bring that down because it's all there. It's just a question of how you choose to go about it. And I think that does come through. The Decent Proposal one is such a great example because one of the questions that I was thinking about earlier, the designs often are these wonderful homages to film posters or a certain design aesthetic based off of when the episode might have been set or what the episode was trying to accomplish, like "Oh Ye of Little Faith," obviously that nod to The Exorcist. Are there times when you find yourself having an idea of your own, maybe free of those influences, or do you kind of look for some of those influences maybe a little bit more often than not, just due to the nature of Quantum Leap? Because, in your other work, obviously, like some of this stuff is clearly just like, oh, that's JJ, like that's just you, and it's lovely. And I think the Quantum Leap stuff is as well, but there's also this tendency to kind of wear the influence on your sleeve, which I think might even make it easier for people to connect with in some ways.
Yeah, it's that line between homage and ripping off. For Quantum Leap, and part of it is, there are only so many elements to a poster, to a one sheet poster.
Mm-hmm.
You've got the art, you've got the title, and you've got the credits. If you want to think about it that way, and so taking it on like a case per case basis, a lot of the episodes so far of the new Quantum Leap are very much embracing some of these film connections. They're doing it somewhat through plot, but very much through the title of the episodes and certain elements that exist within the episodes. So when I see an episode titled Stand By Ben, and it's about a group of kids who were wandering the wilderness,
yeah,
I can't ignore that connection. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It would feel disingenuous to say, well, there's a clear connection to Stand By Me, but I want to make this wholly my vision, and so I'm gonna jettison any idea that I have that's connected to that, even though it's right in front of my face. And I just think that that's ego. I think that you can find a way to have it both ways. I think you can do an homage to the poster or the title treatment for the film that is clearly being homaged by the creators of the show, but then give it your own spin and give it your own style, and finding ways to make it unique. So that poster itself became sort of this weird merging of the original Stand By Me one sheet, which features sort of this stark image of the wilderness featured in that film, and the four little silhouettes of the kids down towards the bottom. And the title treatment is sort of like a Courier typewriter font, which I think is supposed to connect to the fact that it's sort of a story within a story in the film. You have the adult Richard Dreyfuss who's typing out a memoir.
Yeah.
So, you take some of those elements, but then I also found myself being inspired by, mid-century or earlier travel posters, which is something that I love. It's a genre of art that I really like. And so you'll see a lot of that in that poster too, that kind of color palette, the fact that it's focusing on the wilderness. But even with all of that, you don't want to forget about the characters. And so you find a way to put them front and center. And something that I did on that poster, which I don't know if it reads or anything like that, but you've got the three kids and you've got Ben, but then you also have Addison there. And I actually did a bit of a texture on Addison so that she's fading, just to kind of show that she's there with them, but she's not really present. And that's kind of about the relationship between Ben and Addison, which is explored in that episode too. The fact that, Ben's remembering more, he's remembering more of their relationship, but there's still this literal distance between them. And that can't be ignored. And so trying to find little ways to hint at that kind of stuff visually.
I love that. Man, This is great. So, no, I think that is such a wonderful, kind of explanation of your process. To get a little bit deeper into that, there are, the majority of the posters at least feature Ben.
Yes.
Like Ben is in all of them except for Atlantis, which technically he kind of is, but we don't necessarily see his face.
Yeah. His likeness is not
right
on that poster. Yeah.
But I'm curious because there are others which feature the rest of the, like Stand By Ben, which has a large bit of the cast, Fellow Travelers, which I think has a brilliant way of incorporating the rest of the regulars into the hat and everything. Talk a little bit about what goes into the decision-making process for, a poster like Paging Dr. Song, which is just Ben, or O Ye of Little Faith, versus, say, a Fellow Travelers or What a Disaster, where you get more of the cast included on that poster.
So I think it's about priorities. So part of me would love to include the entire principal cast on every poster. But like I was saying before, if less is more, then things will fall away. And so the last thing I want to do is sacrifice a great design so that I can work in everything in the kitchen sink. And, not to say that the cast doesn't deserve to be featured on every piece of artwork. It's just a matter of finding ways to do it organically. And so the Fellow Travelers poster, that felt like an organic way to bring them into the mix. It also felt like an event episode to me because it was the first one back from hiatus. Similar to the premiere episode. Everyone's on that poster because that poster is somewhat less about the episode itself and more about the premiere of the show.
Mm-hmm.
And so I tried to have my cake and eat it too with that one because I've got them all there. It's this nice, tight layout. We've got colors around there, in the faux clock, which creates the Quantum Leap treatment in that. But it is also very much inspired by the Live Aid poster, which is featured in the story of the episode. And the Live Aid poster, if people aren't familiar with it, if you want to Google it, it's a very simple design, which has the word live on top of the word aid, and the eyes in both of those words form the neck of a guitar. And so I use that same trick, except I use different shapes in Quantum Leap to form one of the hands of a clock. Again, you have this connection to the episode, but you want to give the show the spotlight itself. And so I don't have ancillary characters from the Leap in that one. It's all about the main cast. And then as we go on our journey throughout the season, some of those things can fall away. We can bring in some images and likenesses of guest stars. The other challenge of doing a project like this, and I do think of it as a project, is that, yes, each week I'm working on a separate piece, but the piece is going into a portfolio of designs. And so I want to make sure that there's some variety in those designs, and that just like the creative team is telling a story over, what has become 18 episodes, I want these posters to try and tell a varied story over 18 images. And so, that's about not repeating myself, making sure that the styles are very unique to each poster, and just trying to create some variety in the designs. And so not having everyone in every poster also creates some variety. You can create some more simple layouts with just Ben, or like in Atlantis, we don't have a likeness on that one, but the story is alluded to regardless. Finding creative ways to do that. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that does. That makes a lot of sense. And I think that, one of the things about like O Ye of Little Faith, for instance, that I love is that you get that wonderful homage to The Exorcist, right? But at the same time, I think by choosing to put Ben on there alone, and in the way that you do with the shadows falling on his face and everything, is that it reminds us that throughout the course of this episode, there's that nice connection to how alone he feels throughout the episode, which I think is one of those strong connections,
Sure.
As far as an example that kind of popped into my head. Have you ever had a time when you've done one of these designs where you feel like a strong conflict? You want to go one way, but then you go that other way. And I know that, as an artist, it's important to kind of have that don't look back mentality, but are there certainly sort of like alternate versions out there that you could see yourself wanting to do or have done?
So the simple answer is only every single time. There is, you sort of need, like any creative, whether you're an artist or certainly if you're a writer, you cannot be precious with your work. You have to try to keep the final product in mind. So you might start something. I'll start a design and be like, man, this part's so cool. I'm really excited about this part. And by the end of the process, it's like, that part's got to go because that part is not serving the whole anymore. But it's important because it was the first step in the creative process. So you need that part to get where you end up, but you can't be precious about letting some of that stuff fall away. And I think when I'm doing my best work, I can see the difference between those things. In terms of alternate versions, there are jettison drafts for some of the episodes. There are slightly different versions of the posters that might have more to do with color palette or likeness than overall layout. I work fast, and I work fast because I do this for a living. And, not to sound crass, but, when you're freelance, time is literally money. And when you're an artist and you're like, hey, I'm going to make art and I want you to pay me for making art. I mean, that's kind of a big ask for a lot of people. It's like, it depends on how much you value this stuff. And of course I value it greatly. And I think that everybody should. But part of what I think can make you an attractive person to work with is not just that you can work fast, but hey, I can work fast because I've been doing this for a long time and I know how to navigate through a creative process. And so it's better for me. It's better for clients. I think it's better for the work ultimately. And so I don't have a ton of jettison drafts just because when I'm putting my pen to paper, as it were, I've been doing this for a long time, that I feel confident in the direction that I'm starting in. And I'll try not to veer too much off because that's where things get messy when you start second guessing yourself again and again and again, because it can get very dangerous constantly second guessing yourself and doing a U-turn and starting a new draft. Now that stuff does happen. It does happen from time to time. But, honestly, when I find myself doing that, I usually step away. Because I'm like, okay, I think that I need to take a break. I need to step away. I need to get some distance from this project, or just generally some distance, because you can only sit at the drawing board for so long before you have to, visit the real world, or hug your wife, or, kiss your daughter and just kind of get a little bit of a recharge for yourself. I tend to work fast, and I tend not to start a ton of drafts of stuff, but there have been in the past some projects that have tested me when it comes to that.
Yeah.
Without a doubt. Yeah. And also I'll say this, these Quantum Leap posters are great because it's a personal project, and there's been a ton of buy-in from the creative staff and the cast and everything like that. But when I'm doing my officially licensed work, there is an entire apparatus that I have to work within. And I have been incredibly fortunate in my career to have these opportunities. And even when you're working in that structure, I have been fortunate that I have, for the most part, just been able to sort of run wild and do what I want to do. But there are always notes. And these notes can be something as small as, can you move this block of text a little bit? Or it can be, this likeness doesn't work. Or we don't have the rights to this person's likeness, which means that it needs to be taken out. So thankfully, I'm not falling into those pitfalls when it comes to the work I'm doing with Quantum Leap. But if I'm working on, if I'm working on Star Trek, if I'm working on Star Wars, doing the official stuff for the X-Files, that stuff I have to keep in my mind as well. And with the episode work, oftentimes studios won't have the rights to use likenesses of folks like guest stars. So you want to make sure that you're just using the regular or recurring cast. And so you're sort of creating limitations for yourself, which at first can seem tough, but I sometimes I feel like limitations in the creative process are good because it keeps you on your toes.
Sure.
And so I've gotten to the point in my career where even when I'm doing my own personal project, I tend to try to create certain limitations for myself so that I'm not sort of going off the deep end with my stuff. And I think it honestly helps. And I would suggest other creatives, if you're having trouble finishing a project, because we can all start projects. That's the easy part. I would tell my friend who lives out in LA, like he and his friends would always talk and it's like, oh, what are you working on? What are you working on? What are you working on? And I had said, if you really want to freak them out, ask them what they've finished lately. Because that's the hard part. Because
Yeah.
Not that it isn't hard to start something, but it's really hard to finish something. So if you focus on finishing, even if it's not perfect, even if it's not good, once you start finishing more and more things, it really does help focus you and build your confidence as a creative. At least that's what I think.
Yeah, that's a wonder. I don't know that I've ever actually heard it put that way before, because I think it is incredibly important. And I can remember times when, with writing specifically, it's so easy to like start something, right? But until you finish it, and like you said, even if it's not good, you don't, what have you learned really about your process, right? Like if you just continue like starting things without finishing. So I think that's a wonderful way to put that. Speaking about
out there. Yeah.
Right. And I think that's one of the things too that can be difficult as an artist sometimes is that idea of like letting go. It's for me, like when I look at artists that I love, somebody like Bob Dylan always comes to mind, and the idea that one of the things that he's been able to do so relentlessly, to a fault almost, is continue like moving forward and changing. And that famous documentary called "Don't Look Back" about him. I mean, that's kind of his whole ethos, right? And yet at the same time, he has this ability to then take stuff that he did 50, 60 years ago and reimagine it in new ways, which I think is fabulous too. And I think that sometimes one of the things that can be so difficult as an artist is to let go.
I don't know if it's
right?
my
And it's one of the things,
yours.
like as an actor, it's like before you walk on stage, you really do have to let go of.
Let me know if you can still hear me.
Everything that you worked on in rehearsal, everything that you up until this point has kind of been a part of the plan. You just have to let that go completely and go out there and do it and just exist and behave. And I think that that's one of the things that, it's not just as an actor, it's not just as a songwriter or writer or, graphic artist or whatever. It's the idea that like all art at some point is no longer belongs to you, it belongs to the audience. And so I think that ability to, to kind of finish, to let go, to continually try to learn something from what you're doing is one of the most important things about being an artist.
Yeah. Full disclosure, you paused in the middle of that, but I heard the beginning and the end, and I think I got it, and I agree. And I will say, you shared that anecdote about an acting teacher of yours, and I studied acting when I was in college.
Cool.
It was my first job. I was a touring actor for a couple of years after I graduated from school.
Nice.
And very similar advice from what you were talking about. Was it one of your professors that said to take something and distill it?
Mm-hmm.
You'd get a lot of young performers who would get on stage and they would know their lines, or they would mostly know their lines, and they would deliver them, and they would hold back. And something that one of my professors would always say to folks who were doing that is, just give me everything you have. Just lay it all out there. I want you to give me more than I need so that I can pull you back and get you to where I think you should be. Because if you don't give me everything you have, then I don't know what we're working with. And so I think about that a lot too, because you can spend so much time as a creative person trying to make the perfect version of the thing that you have in your head, not realizing that frankly will never happen, because anyone can find fault in their own work. What's nice is that the faults that you see often won't be visible to the people looking at it, or they won't see them as faults. They'll see them as style. And so I think sometimes there's a disconnect there. And I think what you're saying is that, ultimately the work will belong to the audience once it's out there. They have to judge the perfection of it. And you just have to move on to the next thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, because that's the key, and especially like you were saying, when it comes to the business side of it, quite frankly, being a freelance artist, like you really do just have to move on to the next thing with that sort of don't look back mentality. Yeah, you got to eat. That's another professor of mine used to say, but. The process, I mean, you talked a little bit about studying acting and stuff. I'm curious, like, at what point, this sounds like such a weird analogy, but I think it is true for artists. And it might sound sacrilegious to some, but, you often hear of like people of faith, like getting that call, right? And I think it's very similar with artists. At some point you just realize it's like, this is what I'm meant to do. And so I'm curious, like, at what point did you kind of figure out and say like, oh, this is where I'm supposed to go?
So in terms of a calling, I've always felt called to make art. And I was one of those kids that would, sort of sit on their own and do their own thing, whether it was writing or reading, which I love to read. I would spend a lot of time at the library, and I always loved drawing. And so when I was a young kid, if you would have asked me, what are you going to be when you grow up? I would have said I was going to be an artist, to draw for a living. And as I got older, I started to get a lot of advice from adults that would say, that's not really a good idea. That's not a very practical idea. You might want to look into doing something else. And so I took a lot of that advice to heart and figured, okay, well, this is something that I like to do. This is something that I think I'm good at, but maybe this is not something that I am going to make my career. And it took a long time, going to school and doing other things for a few years to sort of come full circle and realize, well, I think this is what I want to do. And I think that I'm good enough to do it. And I think that I can do it in a way where I can make it practical. And so it was sort of this, zigzag path to where I am today, where I always knew what I wanted to do, but I wasn't always confident enough and was literally getting advice not to pursue it. And so I kind of had to right myself and just sort of give myself the permission to pursue this career. And, I'm very happy that I have, because I've been very fortunate and have had some success.
Yeah, and I think that's the other thing, the other key, right, is like success can be defined in so many different ways, and as it should be, because I think everyone has to kind of take their own measure of that. But that validation, that feeling of like, I'm doing this in spite of people saying, hey, that's not a great idea. It really is a great feeling. Yeah. Right. So at what point, because having seen your work, again, like walking into a comic book shop and seeing it, and then, and then being able to check out everything that's on your website, which I should mention is jjlindell.com. That's JJLENDL.com. We'll have that in show notes, and I'm sure we'll mention it again. But, at what point did you start to feel that success? Did you start to feel like, hey, I'm really doing this?
Well, I had a big break about 7 years ago. So I was working in library services at that point, which is a field that I'm very passionate about, and which that I worked in some capacity up until the pandemic hit. And we had our daughter, which made it a lot harder to do everything. So I was working with kids, I was working with creative technology, and I was teaching kids how to do a lot of the things that I was passionate about. I was teaching them how to use programs like Photoshop and Illustrator, teaching them how to do music stuff, digital audio workshops and 3D design, but it was more as an instructor. And through all that, I had stepped away from art for a while, but I kept coming back to it. And so there was one October, there has been this trend online for a while called Inktober. I don't know if you're familiar with this or not.
Yeah.
It's a challenge for artists that every day of the month of October, you create a drawing and you post it. And so, it's this shared activity and it's a way to sort of force yourself to create art for an extended period of time. And you're posting it publicly. So, there are people who are, where they didn't post today. Where's your stuff? So it keeps you accountable. And so I decided to do this, and I was thinking, it was the week before October started, and I'm like, what do I want to do? And I've always been passionate about film and television and design, and particularly poster design. I love one sheets. I love movie posters. I love the art behind it. And so I was thinking, it'd be really cool to do a one sheet poster every day for the month of October, being incredibly naive, thinking that's something someone does. And so I was like, I think it'd be really cool to find a specific property to do that for. And I landed on The X-Files, which is a show that I've always loved. And there are tons of episodes of it. And so every day of the month of October, I made an episode poster for an episode of The X-Files. And I started a Tumblr for it back when Tumblr was the cream of the crop of of the social media landscape, and it took off, and people responded to the artwork, and I was floored that people, one, found my stuff, and two, liked what they found. And so I did that for 31 days in a row, and then continued to do it on a regular basis via requests. People would request episodes, and I would turn those episodes of The X-Files into posters. This is where you get into the luck aspect of it, because there's always some dimension of luck. I happened to choose The X-Files, and within about a year of me doing that, it was announced that the show would come back and be revived. And so suddenly I have this portfolio of work for a very, current and living IP. And it wasn't long after that I was approached by Fox to partner with them to create episode artwork for a rewatch campaign that they were doing via all of their X-Files social media. So that was my big break.
Wow.
And, it's like, it's a dream come true. I'm making these posters on my own. I'm, working my full-time job. I'm making these posters over my lunch breaks. And suddenly I have, 20th Century Fox saying, hey, can we share your art on our social media every day? Now, when they came to me with this, I was like, whoa. And at this point, I had made probably around 50 posters. And they said, can we use the posters that you've made on the days when the rewatch hits those episodes, and we'll post them and we'll promote your site and we can do prints and all this stuff? And I said, yeah. And then I said, if I were to make more and send them to you in time, would you promote those too? They said, yeah. So I made a spreadsheet of every episode of The X-Files, and I started making tons of posters for the show.
Wow.
So that they could share a piece of my artwork every single day. And so, I created over 200 episode posters for the show so that I could take advantage of this opportunity and ride this wave. And, that's how I got my work officially licensed. That's how I ended up, the following year, I was signing prints at Comic-Con in San Diego. So it really was a whirlwind. And working with that franchise has led me to, other jobs, which has led me to other jobs. And that's how that works. If you can get your foot in the door somewhere, and if you can continue to do good work, and most importantly, if you're, I think, pleasant to work with, you'll find that other opportunities will come knocking.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's another great point, just about like, work in general, but especially with art, you want to work with people that you enjoy working with. Man, I love that. I love the fact that, here you are doing something that you wanted to do anyway, and it's able to take you places and lead somewhere where you get to basically continue doing the things that you love to do, and explore all of these other properties within the genre. And there's something lovely about the X-Files stuff, and how pulpy it feels, which obviously is a perfect, mesh with the show. Talk a little bit about, I'm curious, working with Fox, working with the X-Files, and then going from there, what was next? Did Star Trek come next? Did Star Wars come next? Or, was there something else in between? Kind of where did the breadcrumbs lead after that? So,
working on the X-Files prints for the episodes led me to other X-Files work. And that, and part of it is, I'm getting this opportunity, I'm releasing these official prints. It's great. But, you still need to let people know like what you're doing. And so you're sending stuff out. And so I, as a longtime lover of comic books, started sending my stuff out to various publishers, saying, is there, would you be interested in working together? And again, since the X-Files was going through somewhat of a renaissance at this time, this was, 2016, 2017, I reached out to IDW Comics, who had the X-Files license and who had been doing comics with Joe Harris for a couple of years before that. He was sort of imagining a continuation of the show. And of course, now they're actually continuing the show. So as what happens with tie-in media, all the stuff that they had done, like, okay, we're throwing that out the window.
Right.
We have TV canon, and now we can create other tie-in canon. And so they were starting to launch some new X-Files comics, and the editor on those had reached out to me after I had sent my stuff, and he said, hey, we'd love for you to do a couple of covers for this X-Files limited series that we're doing, that he happened to be writing. And so I did a couple covers for them. Then I did a couple more covers. Then I did a couple more covers. And then that led me to work with that same editor when he was placed on Star Trek. And at the same time as this, my publisher, who was releasing the prints for the X-Files, brought me on to work on their Lucasfilm stuff. So then I started doing Star Wars. I started doing Indiana Jones. And then when The Mandalorian debuted, I was put on Mandalorian. And so I've done episode prints for Mandalorian as well. So it all just, again, it just kind of snowballs, and you want to say yes as often as you can. And then it's a matter of trying to schedule the stuff out. And there are busy times and there are lean times. When it rains, it pours. But I find that, again, like with the Quantum Leap stuff, like if I can just keep making things that I'm proud of and that I'm interested in, the work will come.
Yeah. One of the things is, speaking about Inktober, it kind of reminds me a little bit of Harlan Ellison and what he used to do, where he'd sit with his typewriter in the window of like a bookstore. And as he would finish typing the pages, he'd tape them to the window so that people walking by could read the pages. And just kind of that idea of like working without a safety net, like no editing, you're just putting it out there. And how, and in a way, how primal that is, and how it really does tap into like that spirit of creativity that I think we all share. But sometimes, there's that boundary, whether it's fear or, you don't want to be that vulnerable, whatever the case may be. And you really do, you just have to put yourself out there and continue that work.
I love the coffee shop window as the original Tumblr.
Right. Yeah, I'm sure like Harlan is an interesting fellow, and certainly in these times could be classified as somebody a bit problematic. But that said, I think that that ability to kind of like to put yourself out there and to use that, it'd be interesting to see what he would do with with stuff these days. I mean, I know obviously in the early '90s he was starting to use the internet in a way that I think a lot of other artists of his generation, writers in particular, were a little wary of. So I imagine that maybe he wouldn't have found use for Tumblr or Twitter. Who knows? But
yeah, and you know, on top of that, it can be tough because he puts pages on a window and then at the end of the day he takes them down. But when you put stuff online, it's not going anywhere.
Right.
And so certainly there's work of mine from when I was starting out and figuring out how to do this that I'm not particularly proud of. But again, it's like what I was talking about with the design process. Like you have this thing that you really like, this concept, this nugget of an idea, and it takes you, sort of on a creative journey. And by the end of it, you may have to let go of that original one, but it was necessary to get you where you ended up. And so when I see stuff floating around online of mine where I'm like, I wouldn't have done it like that if I had done it today, I try to keep that in mind. But it had to be like that then so that I could get to the point in the process that I am now.
Yeah. It's interesting when especially when you're able to have something kind of quantifiable like that. I have over the past years, slowly but surely, have gotten into painting miniatures. And one of the first tips that I remember getting from someone who, is quite good at it was make sure you save your first one. And I'm so glad that that's something that I did because having the ability to look back at that first one and just be like, oh boy, I have gotten better, because sometimes it's so frustrating. You're in the middle and you're like, you can't really see the forest of the trees and you're just convinced that this is horrible. But having that, to go back, that frame of reference and say like, I've gotten somewhere. It's a nice feeling to have.
Yes. Yeah. See, it's all about perspective.
Right. I'm curious. You've got some stuff on your website that is labeled like personal project, and you don't sell prints for or anything like that. Mm-hmm. And I'm curious, like what the line is for having those personal projects versus the stuff that obviously in the case of like the stuff that you've worked with studios on and stuff. But I'm just kind of curious as to the whys of that.
Yeah, we could talk for a long time about like copyright and intellectual property
right
law.
Of course.
I'm sure it would make for a very interesting podcast for everyone to listen to. There's gray area that's not really gray area, that's kind of gray area. I'm not going to sell prints of licensed properties that I know that the studios would not want me to sell prints of. And so sure. I know that, Viacom CBS does not want me selling Star Trek prints if they're not licensed. So I don't sell them. Universal seems to have no issues with me selling Quantum Leap prints. It's a quieter franchise. The other thing is that, we are entering an age right now with media where we have a ton of conglomerates. And I think that even if you only have a passing interest in the studio system, over the past couple of years, you've seen that a lot of these studios have been bought out, have merged. Just about every studio is attached to a company that has 3 or 4 names as a part of the title because so many companies have been, smushed together.
Right.
And so that has a lot of effects. And one of the effects that I have found that it has is that while these companies get bigger, a lot of their support staff gets smaller. And so when it comes to marketing, when it comes to licensed consumer products, there's less of an interest with some of these larger companies to spend the time and resources on anything but the biggest name franchises. So take the West Wing. So I sell some West Wing prints on my site, some of the designs I've done for episodes. If I thought that I could license those prints with Warner Brothers, I would try to do it in a second. But I know that Warner Brothers isn't really interested in licensing the West Wing art prints. It's just not on their radar. It's not DC. It's not the Wizarding World. These are their bread and butter right now. And so I think there's an opportunity for artists who can find some of these more niche properties, with the studios getting bigger and bigger and all these conglomerates coming together, there tends to be much more of a focus on huge global brands.
Right.
And so a lot of these popular but not blockbuster franchises or IPs, it's really harder to do interesting consumer products for them. And so, Quantum Leap, it's probably not high on the list of, NBC's, Universal's, let's make a bunch of products to, promote this show.
Right.
And so, there are areas like that where I truly feel like it's mutually beneficial, like
Agreed.
For me to, part of the reason why I'm trying to do these every week is to help promote this show so that hopefully more of an audience can find it. And so to keep the ratings up, to get people excited about it every week. And I feel like that benefits the showrunners, it benefits the producers, it benefits the cast and crew, and it benefits the studio. And at the same time, what a lot of studios worry about when it comes to, non-official art or tie-ins is that you're portraying their IP in, a less than attractive light. And that's not what I do. It really, I feel like my love for these franchises, come through in the work that I do. But there are studios that just are not interested in licensing certain properties. And I had mentioned the West Wing. Warner Brothers they're not going to do officially licensed West Wing prints.
Right.
That's not on their priority list.
Yeah.
And so, but for franchises like Star Trek, I work with the Star Trek team in other ways. I know that they don't want me selling prints, and so I don't. I would love to partner with them to do officially licensed prints.
Yeah.
But that just becomes a matter of bandwidth for them, because for every consumer product that a studio takes on, you need to have someone who can double check the legality of the releases, likenesses, approvals. It's manpower. And as these studios get bigger, there seems to be less manpower at their disposal because there's just more to do. I mean, think about Star Trek. So you're like, wow, Star Trek, that's a huge global franchise. Certainly there is, as many people as they would want to, hammer out all of these details. But then you think about, okay, so Star Trek is owned by CBS, which has merged with Viacom and Paramount. What else do they have? Oh, they have Nickelodeon. They have Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. They have the Transformers. There are a ton of huge commercial properties under this one umbrella, and there's only so many people that they have on staff that can work out things like consumer products. So it does make it tougher, I think, for regular consumers to see some really cool, creative tie-ins. For franchises that aren't like banking, over $1 billion a year. And so I do think that's unfortunate. And that's something that I have seen become more and more of a reality since I started working in this line of work. But I think that it does allow for some opportunities to work with some of these more mid-range franchises in the way that I am with Quantum Leap. As long as they don't have an issue with it, I'm more than happy to provide the kind of publicity that the artwork does, and to help the show be the little engine that could as we drive season by season and hopefully get some more renewals.
I mean, certainly it seems quite the contrary, right? I mean, we've talked about it earlier, but definitely the support that we've seen from Martin Garrow and Dean Georgaris and the cast and folks sharing it. I mean, Dean even tweeted out, I think like last week, getting a box that had like shirts and prints and stuff that he had ordered.
It's so gracious. I'm so floored by that.
I mean, I think that it's one of those things that, like, it is, like you said, it's mutually beneficial, and not just in sort of this bottom line kind of way, but to be able to see the stuff that you work on represented in such a wonderful way. Like, it's gratifying. And I can remember, like, just as an actor, the first time, like, my likeness was used for something other than just like a picture or whatever, right? Like, it's just sort of like, wow, like somebody, like, that's an artistic representation of me. The coolest, to this day, one of the coolest things that ever happened to me is somebody like carved my face into a pumpkin for, like, to help promote a show. And it's like, that's the coolest thing that anybody has ever done. And it's, so that sense of kind of like that gratification of that is really, really cool. I want to talk a little bit more about Star Trek real quick, because obviously, as I mentioned, the year 5, I said 5-year mission earlier, but it's Star Trek Year 5 by IDW that you did those covers for. And one of my favorite things upon going to your website and finding what is the Deep Space Nine stuff that you've done. I mean, Deep Space Nine is one of my favorite shows ever. It's my favorite Trek. And I just am floored by some of these in particular. Obviously, Far Beyond the Stars, which is a very famous episode. I think you just nailed it. It's so perfect. But one that I keep coming back to again and again that I love looking at is It's Only a Paper Moon. Just because there's this sense of like artifice and whimsy that you've nailed, while also really getting that loneliness and sense of isolation that Nog is feeling. And unfortunately, Aaron Eisenberg is somebody that we lost recently. And I just think it's such a wonderful piece. Can you talk a little bit about, the DS9 stuff in general, obviously, but that specific piece, like, what was some of the stuff that you were going for when you were creating that?
So I made that piece toward the beginning of the pandemic. It's when everyone was stuck at home and we were at, high COVID protocols. Everything was shut down. And, you want to talk about a sense of isolation.
Yeah.
That was it. The other layer of that poster you alluded to was, I was fortunate enough to know Aaron. And nicest guy in the world. He approached me to do artwork for his podcast, The Seventh Rule, which is still going strong. We had some wonderful conversations about that. I created some art for that podcast, and then he and I got to meet finally face to face at San Diego Comic-Con back in 2019, the last one that they had before the pandemic hit. And he was so gracious, and he was at a panel with some other DS9 folks that was connected to the documentary that they had made about.
Oh yeah, it's so good.
And so, he spots me and he's like, "Oh, come in." So, he pulls me aside after the panel, and he's introducing me to Sirach and Andrew Robinson and all these actors from the show, and took photos with me. Just such a nice guy, and he didn't have to do any of that, but he knew that I was a fan of the show, and he knew that I was really passionate about Trek, and so he just showed such just such grace, and I only got to spend a little bit of time with him, but everybody I've spoken to before and since had the same things to say about Aaron. So it was hard not to make that poster without thinking about him and the loss that had happened recently as well. And so that's sort of another layer of that. So that poster is, obviously it's a tribute to the episode and the themes and everything, but that poster is really a tribute to Aaron himself and his wonderful performance.
I'm so glad I ended up asking about it. Well, I think that it's beautiful. And again, genuinely, it's I think the one that I kind of come back to the most, because
Thank you.
I think it's really just incredibly well done and fitting tribute to the episode, but also fitting tribute to him, because what a showcase for him as well, which is well deserved. The 25 years ago or so that the episode came out.
Crazy, man.
It is. Do you, at the risk of kind of like, having to choose between metaphorical children, do you have a favorite episode of DS9, and do you have a favorite print that you've done?
That's tough. DS9, Star Trek is an interesting franchise in terms of picking favorites because it's huge.
Yeah.
And the tone of the show, of each of the shows, and then certainly from show to show, can be all over the map.
Sure.
Which is kind of what makes it really fun to do artwork for, especially episodic artwork. I think for DS9, it becomes sort of like a. Hold on one second. I'm so sorry.
No worries.
Sorry. The family downstairs a little bit. Blend that together.
We're a family show.
Come on in, folks. It's a show that goes through a lot of changes throughout, certainly early on, as most Star Trek shows do. I mean, it's sort of like it's a Star Trek curse. You have to find your footing over the first season or two. Which, to bring that back to Quantum Leap, we've watched that show find its footing in less than a dozen episodes.
Yeah.
Which is incredibly exciting, especially for a network show where they're making tons of these episodes.
Right.
And they're writing them on the fly. This isn't a show where they have every single script set and locked before they start production.
Right.
Anyway.
Well, we're going to get back there.
Yes. I like every facet of DS9, so it's really tough to pick. I like the Ferengi episodes, which a lot of people don't love, but I like the war episodes as you're getting further into the show. But I also like a lot of the earlier episodes because they tend to be smaller, character-driven pieces. Star Trek is one of those franchises that I think more so than others are always like, it's kind of like a play. It's a play a week. It feels theatrical in a way. The acting is theatrical. The makeup is theatrical. The sets are theatrical. And so I do appreciate those parts of DS9 as well. If I had to choose a favorite, and I'm going to be super basic here, and this also has to do with recently becoming a father, I'm going to go with The Visitor.
Oh.
And we both just start weeping.
Yeah, that's right. Oh, man.
It's a good example of an episode that is so Star Trek-y because it's about this temporal phenomenon, and you've got someone who's unstuck in time, and, we're seeing new ships and different versions of uniforms and all the stuff that the people on, Memory Alpha are like, I got to create an entry for this. I got to create an entry for this. But the core of it is this very simple human story about letting go. That's my bread and butter when it comes to Star Trek, is when they can do all of those things simultaneously and knock it out of the park. And I also enjoyed working on that poster because it's a simple design, but it's a deceptively simple design because some people never see Ben in it when they're looking at it.
Yeah.
Which is fine. Then it's just a poster that is about an older Jake staring out the window thinking about his life.
Right.
But when you pull back and you see that everything is framed within his father, then you have another layer of meaning in it, which connects to the episode. So,
yeah. No, I mean, it's one of my favorites, and it's also one of my favorites of the art that you've done for DS9 on the website, which I would encourage everybody to go check out. Like, even if you're not a Niner, it's certainly it's some great work, and it really hits on what you were talking about too, with the idea that there's so much variety, and you have the ability to kind of tell so many different kinds of stories in a show like Star Trek, which I think is one of the things that sometimes people lose sight of. And even personally, I can remember seeing The Visitor Visitor for the very first time, like watching it when it aired. And granted, I was like, 14, I think.
Not the prime demographic.
Right. Right. And I think I was let down because, it was right after Way of the Warrior, had just aired. And so like, you get this awesome, like 2-part big, spectacle with all this
war. They're fighting Klingons.
Exactly.
Bodies on the promenade.
and then all of a sudden I remember the Visitor opened. I'm like, what is this? Like, I don't get it. And then of course, I come to it maybe 5 or 6 years later, and just, was floored by it and continue to be every time, every rewatch that I do. It's one of the episodes that I can't wait to get to in that bittersweet sort of way. It's like, I really want to see it, but I know it's going to hurt me when I do.
Right. Ready to be hurt again.
Right. But I think that, that's one of the things too about Quantum Leap. Like you mentioned, it can be so many things. And I think that that's one of the things that's so incredibly appealing. And it's another thing that shows off in the art that you've done. So similar question, which I know will be difficult, but when it comes to the revival, do you have a favorite episode so far? And do you have a piece of yours that you've done for these first 10 episodes, 9 episodes, 10 episodes, in that you like the most?
To think about that for a second. So there are certain episodes that have hit for me more than others. Mm-hmm. And again, you have a show that's kind of finding its footing. You have actors who are finding their footing in these roles.
Yeah.
And, this version of Quantum Leap compared to the original, I'm not sure how to refer to this stuff. I don't know. It's right. Like, is this a new show? Is this a season 6? Is this, Yeah. Anyway. The original Quantum Leap tended to be mostly about the situations that Sam found himself in and then Al giving him support. This show isn't that. It's kind of that. But there is much more of a connection to the present. And so, in analyzing, like, what's my favorite episode, we have this through line story, which is something that we're not used to having with Quantum Leap, other than the fact that, Dr. Sam Beckett wants to get home.
Right.
So in terms of everything they're working, for me, like, I really enjoyed the "O Ye of Little Faith" episode. That was kind of like, that was the first episode I did a poster for. And there's a reason for that, because I had watched, the previous 6 episodes, and I'm like, this show is good and it's getting better. And then when that episode aired, perfectly timed Halloween episode, everything's together, really interesting ideas, really well drawn setting, characters, and it was just like, well, I got to make a poster for that. So that was a standout for me. I also really liked What a Disaster, and I know that episode has a lot of behind the scenes nuggets connected to it because it was the original pilot episode. And so from what I understand, there were a ton of reshoots done to that original pilot to key it in to where it is in the timeline of the show as aired. But I really liked that episode because there was a lot of urgency built throughout.
For sure.
Which worked for me. There was urgency on both sides of the imaging room door, if you will.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
We're stealing that.
Great. And so I don't know. I think other than that, I mean, I really liked last week's episode, and I really liked the episode the week before. And I think that is emblematic of a show that's really finding its groove, where it's like, oh, my favorite episode? Oh, probably the last one. Probably the last one that aired. Because it really is finding its footing in a lot of ways. And so I can't wait to see where we end up by episode 18 and where they leave the season off.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that's been incredible, because I feel like we've been fortunate over the past, 20 years almost now, where there's been a lot of genre television that has come along where you do find shows that are able to kind of like give you a really awesome premiere episode and then slowly build up to some great stuff. But to be able to see a show like this have that, not just build in the plot and the story and that emotional punch, but just the quality overall continuing to get better. It's so exciting, while also doing all those other things, deepening the characters, deepening the story and the plot. And it's fascinating to me sometimes, you see some of the criticisms, if you can really call it, might be generous to call it that, from people. And part of me is just sort of like, man, are we watching the same show? Are you paying attention? Because there has been, just the characters in particular, I find, have been unfolding to us in these really wonderful ways. And Paging Dr. Song is a perfect example of learning so much more about Addison, through, yes, some exposition, but also just through the choices that she's making. And I think that to me, anytime you can like show me something as opposed to telling me something, it's going to be stronger. And I feel like we've gotten so much of that from these characters. Do you look forward to the opportunity to put Janice on one of the posters? Because we haven't had Janice on a poster yet.
I even had that conversation with Georgina.
Nice. Awesome.
I want to get her on it. What's tough, especially when I'm working from, there's two things. When I'm working from promo materials, it's much clearer to me what the mission side of the episode is going to be versus what the other side of the episode is going to be, and how much further that arc is going to get through a given episode. The other hard part is that, so think about Deep Space Nine. So you look through my episode posters and you will see, I remember that episode. I remember that episode. I remember that episode. But what you might not be remembering when you just look at the posters is the B story or the C story, because it's not on there, because you can't have everything on a poster. And so it would be very strange if I did a poster for an episode of Quantum Leap that featured more of the present day story than the leap. Because it's just the nature of the show. It's the nature of the franchise. So it's finding ways to blend those things together. And I'm not a fan of just like, well, you want her on the poster? Just throw her on there. Just put her in the corner.
Right.
There's got to be some impetus to it. There's got to be a reason. And so it's just a matter of me figuring out where that belongs and getting her on there. But I love the character. I like the performance. She does, having just watched an episode of the original Quantum Leap, a couple actually, there is this connection between her performance and Dean Stockwell's, which is very interesting to me.
Yeah.
And so I'm looking forward to seeing that continue to evolve.
I completely agree. And I think that, it's been fascinating to see the way that the character is used. But one of the things that I'm even more kind of all in on is her performance. I think Georgina is doing just phenomenal work, and it's very layered, and there's so much, I especially those early episodes, those first appearances, I can just remember, we're watching the episode hopefully twice before we record, and in particular upon that rewatch, just finding so much stuff under the surface, and it's been a joy to watch. And in this last episode, obviously we got a lot more of her in the interaction with the team, which I can imagine was probably tempting in a way to include. But I think that the poster as it stands, I just love. I love the mission. Save a career, save lives, do no harm. It's so beautiful, and it's this wonderful kind of encapsulation not only of the episode and Ben's mission, but I feel like it goes beyond that, right? The idea that that's just what Ben's mission is in general. That's the mission of Quantum Leap, right? It's to save something, not do any harm. Yeah. I'm interested too, because it's such a contrast to what you're talking about too, with what you include and choose not to include on these Quantum Leap posters. And like you said, sometimes that's based off of the material you're working with. But looking at like some of your Star Wars stuff, which is lovely, no less engaging whatsoever, but there's a lot more on those posters. It is more like you've got kind of the whole story, if you will, on those Star Wars posters. Is that kind of the studio, wanting that, or is it just because you do have this huge world, this big franchise to play with, you want to get more of it on there?
Star Wars, talk about tone, right?
Mm-hmm.
Star Wars is fairly bombastic in its presentation, Andor notwithstanding.
Good point.
And I'll probably end up doing some artwork for Andor. My Andor posters would not look like my Mandalorian posters.
Yeah.
Because Andor does not look like the Mandalorian. The story is not told in the same way. And so, no, you're absolutely right. It's connected to the tone of the show and how expansive the world is, but it's also style. It's a style choice. Like, those are very throwback style, vintage one sheet creations. And you still need a layout. You need a nice tight layout, but there's more room to play. And the way that I'm executing those likenesses is much more traditional and painterly.
Sure.
And so you have blended colors and palettes, and it just seems more natural to include more when you're working in that kind of tone. Whereas, Quantum Leap, it's a smaller world in each episode. It's like a microcosm, that's always been the nature of the show. The Leaper is dropped into this fishbowl and has to figure out, what's going on, how to make it right, and then they jump into the next one. And it doesn't necessarily lend itself to a more bombastic presentation. I'd say the closest that I got to that was the episode for What a Disaster. Because it's baked into the DNA of that episode.
Absolutely.
And that episode, I mean, if we want to talk about from a production standpoint, that episode clearly had a bigger budget than the rest of the episodes we've seen in season 1.
Yeah.
And so you take what's on the screen and you put it on the page. So that's how I'd answer that question. Yeah, Star Wars, just like, when I do Star Wars stuff, it's fundamentally different than when I do Star Trek stuff. Because again, Star Trek, it's this expansive universe, this federation of worlds, but from a storytelling perspective, it's a little quieter. The world's a little quieter.
It's interesting too, because even within the realm of like those year 5 covers, I think the thing that's really cool is that there's definitely something I feel like that ties them all together in a way. And yet at the same time, you found ways to make them all have their own individual look and style, which I think is really cool. But going back to the DS9 stuff, for instance, I mean, that stuff is all over the map and in such a wonderful way, because it's reminiscent of the way that the show could cross those boundaries between, comedy and war stories and those more personal stories. And I think that's, I mean, the diversity of your work is something to be applauded, honestly. And I'm not just like trying to heap praise on you because, you've come on our show or whatever, but I think that it's something that lacks, like it is lacking sometimes. It's so easy. And not, I mean, I don't want to throw shade at anybody for doing this, because you can say everybody's got their own thing and some people are just brilliant at doing their thing. So why not stay in that lane? But to be able to step kind of out of that comfort zone and find so many different ways to, tell that story, as an artist, I think is just an incredible attribute to have. And I think you do it very well.
That's very, very kind. And I really appreciate hearing that. Yeah, I've had to kind of accept that, in lieu of a really specific style or aesthetic, the connection between my work and my pieces is me. And that's it. It's that I made them. And that I have to trust that something of me is in each of these. And I've seen it. People will recognize my work sometimes, even if I'm not working in the style. When I say that I see it. I see that it's yours. But it's not necessarily something that's in your face. Like, I don't always work in like vector silhouettes or, what some artists do, which again, incredible work, but
sure.
I guess I'm just coming from a different perspective. And, sometimes that can lead to really great things. And sometimes it can, not be the most beneficial in terms of some opportunities. But like when it comes to the Star Trek stuff, I remember I've gone round and round trying to get these Star Trek prints licensed and cannot quite find a way to thread that needle for various reasons. But one response that I had from someone was, I present them the portfolio. Oh yeah, it's good stuff. I see that a lot of the posters only feature like one or two characters. It'd be really great if you could put all the characters on the posters, because people will take the conventions and they just want to have the actors sign their names next to their picture. And I mean, you could not turn me off anymore. Like,
sure, right?
Of like, I'm like, I'm not making these to be, of course, if people want to sign them, that's great. But like, I'm not making these so that they can be taken to conventions and signed by all the actors so that people can check things off a list.
Yeah,
Like,
they're not making a commodity. Like, it is
right.
a genuine, piece of artistic expression.
Yeah,
not that those other things aren't.
Absolutely.
But, yeah, they're more merchandise.
This is what I'm bringing to you. It's like when you post something online, or people are like, it's okay, but I would have done this, and it's just like, then do.
Right.
I cannot wait to see your version. Please share it. Tag me in it. I would love to see. I would love to see your take.
Yeah.
But it's a lot easier to look at something and say, not this, as opposed to like, doing it.
Right. Well, it's interesting too, because like with the West Wing stuff, which again is some lovely, incredible stuff. I love the fact that, in a show that was famous for having those B and C and sometimes D plots within the course of an episode, you've distilled it down to like, here's the most important element, to me as an artist. And this is how I want to show that to you. And I think that, yeah, not that there's a lot of people out there clamoring for, posters with every character on it to get signed at conventions for West Wing, but again, right. I feel like if you did like add in more stuff, it would just take away from the impact. I mean, one of the things that's kind of fascinating to me is looking at like the art for Two Cathedrals, which is a brilliant episode, one of the finest of the series. And the way that, I look at the poster print, right? And it's beautiful. It's wonderful. But the T-shirt is like heartbreaking. I mean, literally. And it's just so lovely. And I'm curious, like, I mean, it would probably be tempting, right, to just slap what you did on the poster on a T-shirt and call it a day. But the truth is these are two distinct pieces of art. And I'd love to hear just about like the decision to do that, as opposed to just kind of take what's on the poster and put it on a T-shirt.
I don't like how it looks.
Fair enough.
Poster art is rectangular and T-shirts are not. I could just grab the file and throw it on a shirt and have it printed. But I think that it's an opportunity to adapt a design, which is exciting to me. And I just think it looks better. It looks more cohesive. And so, yeah, you've got to find a way to destroy the border that exists around a piece and make it stand on its own at the center of a new canvas. And so that's what I think of it. If I can take an opportunity like in the Two Cathedrals to add a new layer to the artwork as I go through that process, then even better. But again, I wouldn't take that art from the T-shirt and then put it on a poster.
Right.
Because it's like when it's like when you adapt a book into a screenplay. It's just inherently different. Something that you hang on the wall is different than something that you're going to wear around for a day and then throw in the wash. And, you have to think about stuff like that too. So in terms of Quantum Leap, I've slowly been adapting those designs to T-shirts.
Nice.
But again, it's about finding a way to do it organically without just putting this box on a shirt.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, in looking at the T-shirts for Quantum Leap, for instance, like Salvation or Bust, and that one in particular to me stands out as feeling very, very separate from the others. I mean, they all do, and there's something lovely about O Ye of Little Faith with losing kind of the the borders that you have on the poster. It's very evocative.
And then that's in the execution of something like that too. That shirt's only available in black, because the actual graphic that's used doesn't have any black on it. It's literally just the only colors that are printed are that off-white and the purple. So you think about that with when you're working with attire as well, is that your base color, whatever shirt you use, can help tell your color story as well. And for that shirt, I'm like, well, I don't want a black box. This happens in the darkness. It's just got to be on a black shirt, and I get rid of all the black from the design. So if you could see the file that I used for that, when you look at it on a screen, it doesn't look like anything because it's just bits of white where the house and where Ben are highlighted, and then you have to put it over a black fabric for it to actually look like the image. If that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely, it does.
I'm glad we're talking about all this visual stuff on audio medium.
Well, we'll throw some video up there too for the YouTube viewers, listeners. You know
what? If this is going to be up on YouTube, maybe I should take the opportunity to like do a sneak peek of something for you guys.
That would be awesome. We would love that. You mentioned we've taken to call it the classic series, but it's hard to do that even sometimes too, because I agree the revival series feels like season 6, so it's like, should I really be calling it the classic? Isn't it just all the same thing? But anyway,
right. Yeah.
So for the classic series, you recently put out a poll on Twitter to create a print for a classic episode, and I believe at the time that we're recording this, Pool Hall Blues seemed to be the front runner.
It has ended.
It has ended.
The poll ended last night. I had it run throughout the week, and yes, the winner was Pool Hall Blues.
Fantastic.
That's what I did before we started recording.
Did you finish the Pool Hall Blues?
I made a poster for Pool Hall Blues.
That's awesome. Do you want to show it to us?
See it?
I would love to see it. Listeners at home, would you like to see it?
So this'll, it might debut before this, but at least you'll get a nice long look at it, and we can talk about it if you want.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So let me.
While you're doing this, I'll just vamp for a moment here. I think that one of the things that was really cool about the poll, and you had mentioned this too on Twitter, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this a little bit later, but you didn't necessarily want to go with some of those more iconic episodes like Leap Home or MIA or The Leap Back, or episodes that people I think have a very strong attachment to, because you mentioned that that's something you wanted to get to eventually anyway, which I can't wait to see what you do for some of those episodes. Leap Home Part 2 being one of my favorites. I mean, I think that that's an episode where it's just like there's so much that you could do.
Yeah. I was slightly disingenuous when I made that response.
Oh yeah,
because part of the reason why I didn't do some of those episodes is because I've already done posters for them.
Nice.
If you put MIA in a poll, it's going to win.
Right.
But I already have a poster for MIA, which I can also share with you if you'd like.
Yes.
Let's look at Pool Hall Blues.
Let's do it. Dennis, I should have mentioned this earlier, and it'll be mentioned obviously in the preamble, but Dennis couldn't join us today, and now he's really going to regret not being here.
Sorry, Dennis. All right, let's see if this works.
All right.
Let's think.
Oh, here we go. Oh, that's perfect. Oh my gosh.
There's no typos. The beta play.
I don't see any.
So this was very fun to put together this morning. I'm glad that this episode won, because it's it's one of those fun episodes. Like, there's a lot on the line for the characters, but it feels like sort of a smaller show. You have all the action taking place like in one particular area, and there's really great guest cast in the episode. So there was a lot of visuals to play with.
Yeah. I mean, obviously the way that you've used the pool balls, and then the green of the felt kind of to have that as the backdrop, and just the characters' faces. I mean, I just think that this is absolutely perfect. I could not imagine a better representation of that episode. Al is obviously hard at work.
I know. I wanted to get him in his element as he's, trying to get those lines to show up for Sam to cheat at pool.
Right.
I always like when, and I'm sure a lot of people feel the same way, love seeing Sam wearing glasses. So I wanted to highlight that as well.
Yeah. Well, I love the tag. Is it still just a game when there's so much on the line?
Those are so fun to come up with on these things. We come up with a little tagline, and so this has a nice vintage quality. The episode takes place in the mid 50s. This has kind of like a 50s, 60s feel to it, but it felt appropriate. I'm a huge fan of typography, so it's always fun, either finding, tracking down, or creating different fonts to use in my work. And I think I landed on a pretty nice typeface for this poster.
Yeah, I would totally agree. I mean, it's one of the things too about your work in general. I mean, the typography. We've actually had a couple of people, in private messages when we've just been talking about your work, because it happens, where people are big fans of that, and consider themselves kind of nerds when it comes to that in general. No, I do love this, and I can't wait for this to be made available, because I think people are really, really going to like it a lot.
Yeah. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to release a wave of classic episode posters, probably next week.
Nice.
Since we're on hiatus. So Pool Hall Blues will be in there. I'm going to release a print that is only available as a T-shirt right now, but I'll release that as a standard print for Catch a Falling Star,
Nice.
the Don Quixote episode. So that design has been out there in the wild for a while, but I'll actually make that available for purchase. And then the third one will be MIA, which we can take a look at now if you'd like.
Yeah, that would be wonderful. That would be wonderful.
If I close this window here, I'll stop sharing. Now it's us. Actually, before I shall make people wait, if you're interested in typography, and particularly interested in vintage typography, I have this book handy here.
Ooh.
You see that? Art Director's Workbook of Typefaces. So this is from, let me check the copyright date on this. This is something that I'll flip through before I start working to get inspired. So this edition is from 1978. So what you're looking at is a literal art director's workbook from the late 70s that they would use to find fonts. So
that's so cool.
One way to eliminate modern fonts is to only give yourself options that were available in the late 70s. And so it's got tons of variations of different fonts, to the point where you can track some of these fonts down now, as like TTF or OTF files, or oftentimes I will just make them from scratch. If I like the look of something, or adapt them. So it's a cool, if you're a typography nut, track down one of these or one of the other editions, flip through and find yourself transported to another era of typeface. All right, let me find. Oh, I have it here. I hope you guys like this one. I love this episode, and I wanted to do it justice. So I'll just put it up here, and I'll get your thoughts at least. Okay.
Oh, that is stunning.
Is it okay?
It is stunning. I mean, wow. I hope Susan gets to see this, because this is just.
Oh, me too. Yeah, that'd be great.
I mean, it really is wonderful work, JJ. I mean, that is just the decision to frame Al in the way that you have. I mean, just to create that separation, as well as just keeping them close. I mean, it's lovely, and I mean, he's missing, right? I mean, he's literally missing too.
He's MIA. Made sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to resonate with a lot of people.
I hope so.
Yeah, I mean, if like. Seeing the episode makes it extra heartbreaking, but I think that even if you've not seen the episode, seeing a poster like this, there's just, how can it not resonate?
And that's a challenge too, because people will encounter my work that might not be very familiar with the episodes or even the franchises, but you still want them to feel something.
Yeah.
And like ideally, certainly in the case of Quantum Leap, like you see a piece of artwork that's evocative, you might become interested in what the inspiration was.
Right.
And seek it out. So this is a beautiful episode of television, and it's one of my favorites from the classic series. And I rewatched sections of the episode recently before I designed this poster, and Dean Stockwell's performance in the final scene is, and Susan's as well, but I mean, it's just heartbreaking every time.
Yeah.
It's so good. So I knew that this was the poster. Sorry, Scott, but name's on there.
I think in this case he'd be perfectly fine with it, right?
This is a perfect example of what we were talking about. Like Sam Beckett is the protagonist of this episode. He's the protagonist of the show. I didn't feel like he belonged on this poster, regardless of the role that he played in the episode. So
yeah, it really is. Sometimes I think that that's the thing about creativity and art. It's what you leave out is just as important as what you put in.
it's a good way to put it. Yeah.
I can't claim total credit from that. I'm always reminded of that scene in Almost Famous when Billy Crudup's character, is talking to the writer about that, and but I think that is it's incredibly important. That's lovely. Thank you so much for sharing that. And
I'm more than happy to. Like I said, they'll be, if they're not available when this comes out, why don't we time that? We'll time it. I'll make them available after this debuts.
That's awesome. So yeah, we'll drop Tuesday morning. So if you're listening to this, on the 23rd of January, 2023, then shortly after that, you'll be able to head over to jjlindell.com and pick these up. I know I will. It's funny. We're in the process of being in between homes right now, which is why I have this lovely background. And I
thought that was a fake background.
Yeah, right. It's a choice.
This spa is too distracting, so I took.
Right, exactly. But I cannot wait to purchase these and put these up. And I'm not even joking when I say that with the homes that we're looking at potentially buying, I'm literally going in and being like, okay, this would be my space. This will be where I record and where I do my thing. Where am I going to put the posters? And I mean that.
That's very flattering. That's really cool.
Yeah, because it's one of the things. Dennis, as soon as he got, and his was a Christmas present from his wife. Like as soon as he got that,
I saw him post the photo. It looks so good.
Yeah,
it's great framed.
And I can't wait. I can't wait to do exactly the same. Well, I think that this is the perfect way to finish things off. What have you got coming up that you'd like to share with listeners? I know you mentioned an appearance that you're going to be making prior to recording, but just in general, anything that you want to throw out there that's on the horizon besides these beautiful pieces for the classic series that'll go up this week.
Yeah. So if you're in the Orlando, Florida area. The weekend of the 27th through the 30th, I will be signing my Star Wars and Marvel and Indiana Jones artwork at the Epcot International Festival of the Arts at Disney World.
Nice.
So come on out, find me at the Acme Archives booth, and we can chat, talk Quantum Leap. You can check out some of my artwork for other franchises. I will be alone in Disney World, so please come and chat with me. In the past, before COVID, I would try to, I'd bring my wife Skylar down, and we're trying to get the little one down, but it's so tough with, when I have obligations and signing and things. So I just end up at Disney World on my own. But it's fun. I mean, it's a great event. So if you're around, come on out. Keep an eye out each week for a new episode poster of Quantum Leap throughout the run of season 1, and I'll be making those available for purchase via my online shop at jjlindell.com. I've got some other projects brewing. I've always got different things coming up. I doing some more Star Trek covers for some of the newer IDW series, so keep an eye out for that. One of those should be debuting within the next month or two, which is exciting. And there's going to be a deluxe edition of Star Trek Year 5 coming out soon.
Nice.
And so I'll be doing some new poster or some new cover art for that in poster style. So that'll be fun. So, and then lots of other things that I can't talk about. So
awesome. And where can people find you? Where's the best place for people?
You can find me online on Twitter and Instagram at JJLENDL, JJ Lindell. It's the word end, but there's an L on either side. That's how you spell my last name.
Nice.
And then I also have a Facebook page for my artwork as well, but mostly I'm around Twitter and Instagram. And then of course you can check out more of my work at jjlindell.com.
Fantastic. JJ, thank you so very much. I know
Thank you more. This has been a pleasure.
Awesome. Well, maybe we'll get the chance to do it again. I hope we do. And
Anytime.
It's funny because before we started recording, we were talking a lot about family, and I anticipated us talking a little bit about that, but we didn't really get the chance.
There's too much cool nerd stuff to talk about.
I know, right? I didn't even
Well,
get to talk about the Ninja Turtles on the shelf
Okay.
behind you.
Say again?
I said I didn't even get a chance to talk about the Ninja Turtles on the shelf behind you.
Oh my goodness, yeah. Ninja Turtles. There's Ninja Turtles over here too that you can't see. There's a lot. I'm surrounded by toys.
That's awesome.
It's a real problem.
Yeah, I know. My wife would say the same thing.
It's fun. It's inspirational. I like to be surrounded by fun stuff in my office space here when I work.
Yeah.
Lots of fun covers. I mean, like, who is not inspired when you have this guy?
Right. Or terrified, depending on the viewer.
Yeah,
I
well,
suppose,
it depends on what I'm working on.
right, exactly. Right, it sets the mood.
Well, I wish you luck in the house search.
Thank you.
Hopefully
Thanks so much.
it's it's tough. It's tough now. Like we bought our house December 2018. And so we could not be more thankful to have our home here. So, but I'm sure that it looks like things are starting to calm down in terms of the market. So
yeah,
I'm sure you'll find something soon.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate that. And thank you so much for joining. I was about to say us, but I guess it's just me on this wonderful conversation.
Well, give your absent co-host my best, and please thank him for his support as well. And, for being so supportive and passionate about the work that I've been doing with Quantum Leap. It means a lot. And it means a lot that you have been such a supporter of what I've been doing as well. It's really great.
Well, thank you so much for your work, and thank you for joining us. And, I definitely wish you nothing but the best. And hopefully we'll get the chance to do this again sometime. On a mercenary note, I suppose, are you going to be at C2E2 perhaps in Chicago?
I'm not planning on it.
Okay.
I'm still trying to figure out what events I'll be doing this year. It's harder to plan this stuff with a little one.
Of course. Yeah, I can only imagine. Yeah.
So I know I've got the event coming up next week. I've got a couple things slated for the spring. So things have been a lot slower since the pandemic, of course. But since that coincided with the birth of our first child, it's just kind of like, all right, I'm just going to take it slow. Not going to be doing as many shows for the next couple of years.
Yeah.
And we'll see where we are. So
changes ain't just a David Bowie song.
That's true.
But, well, thank you so much.
Hey, we want to thank you again for joining us for this week's episode. Join us next week for our coverage of episode 11, Leap, Die, Repeat. We are thrilled to have Lauren Milberger from the Murphy Brown podcast back on as a guest to discuss the episode. A couple more things. We have show merch you can buy on TeePublic. That information is in our show notes. And as always, please follow us and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. Not only does it warm our hearts and feed our egos, but it also helps other Quantum Leap fans find our pod. And until next week, as Sam always says, leap responsibly.